G'day, I am Major Philip Paradis. I am the Senior Operations Officer for 3rd Canadian Division Support Group out of Edmonton, Alberta. I'm here to talk to you about Remembrance Day and the 100th anniversary of the poppy. Madame Anna Guerin went to a Veterans Symposium in the United States and heard In Flanders Field, which was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a Canadian Army doctor. It inspired her to use the poppy as a symbol, and then she went around to different veterans groups to encourage folks to use it as a symbol of remembrance. The poppy, from the poem In Flanders Field, started out because it was the only thing that grew on the scorched earth from battles, and the bright red poppies growing in between the row and row of crosses, as we've now heard in Flanders Field. John McCrae was a surgeon, had an awful day, and he sat down and he saw these poppies, and it inspired him to write the poem, which then later inspired Madame Anna Guerin to use it as a symbol of remembrance. In 1925, the Canadian Legion adopted it as the official symbol for the Canadian Legion and for remembrance of veterans. And why did this all start? So World War I occurred. Canadians we were the Dominion of Canada at the time, so part of the Commonwealth and under British rule, so we went to support them. And we went and had battles at Passchendaele, Vimy Ridge, which is probably the most known battle in Canadian history, where we lost 10,000 soldiers. Sir Arthur Currie, the general of the Canadian Expeditionary Force, told the British when no one else could take that hill that they could do it and it would have a high cost, and it did. That day we became a nation in the eyes of the world. Would later lead us into the League of Nations, which was the precursor to the United Nations. 20 years later, after the war, World War I, World War II starts up, and again we heard the call, and Canadians as a Canadian country for the first time went to war in the answer again, a British call with our allied partners, the US, New Zealand, Australia, and a lot of other locations throughout Europe, to support France and Poland and all the European nations that were in trouble at that time. The poppy continued to be that symbol of remembrance, the blood red shining against the dark scorched earth, and later on as that symbol black representing the sorrow of loved ones to the loss. For me, it's come to be that item that I wear every year and have done so since I was, well, as long as I can remember. And the poppy grew to be this the flower and symbol of remembrance. My mom talked to me about family members that had gone before me, a great uncle that had passed in Burma in the RAF. My grandfather was in the Royal Canadian Army Service Corps, which I am now part of as a logistician, the Royal Canadian Logistics Service, its precursor, and now here we are today. Interestingly enough, in both world wars, Korea, and every conflict that we have, our business has stood up to be that organization that enables Canadian forces to do what we do. We depend on contracts and local support to make things happen. And even our poppy, which has now been contracted out to an organization to build poppies for the Legion, took that over from veterans when we started having an aging veterans population, and no longer needed to necessarily support soldiers that couldn't do anything else. We've come to talk about how the poppy has blossomed, if you will, into this huge symbol around the world, both in within Britain and New Zealand and the Commonwealth armies, and a few other nations have adopted it. It's that resilient flower that grows where nothing else grows, and creates the space that we have come to know. When you look at North America, Canada, the US, when you look at England and New Zealand, most of Europe owes their freedom to the veterans of past wars. And even today, the continued support, domestic operations that happen to fight forest fires and floods, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force stand up to do those roles. Remembrance Day in the poppy is also bittersweet. It's that remembrance of brothers and sisters at arms that have gone before us. I went to Afghanistan, and it helped focus memories in a more positive light, looking to the future of the poppy and how it could assist us and make us a better nation by remembering all those sacrifices. Ramp ceremonies and the Canadian flag draped over coffins and poppies placed on gravestones every year by No Stone Left Alone come to make this symbol of remembrance the great piece of cloth or plastic as we have now to symbolize those sacrifices, not only of the veterans and soldiers lost and airmen and sailors, but of families who lost their loved ones, and also the loss of those folks when they came back just a little bit different, and how those aspects are all remembered yearly through the Poppy and the Poppy campaign. The Poppy campaign funds go to support veterans and their families and communities. And so local business has really enabled us because they allow us to put our Poppy boxes in their storefronts. We raised almost 14 million last year in the Poppy funds, and from this little flower that people don every year or at various funerals and the like, to remember the sacrifices of those that have gone before us. So 100 years, here we are. It's an amazing thing that it's 100 years. We've gotten better at distinguishing and how we use our armed forces to do and protect those folks out there and around the world and the globe, both in peacekeeping and peacemaking operations in the Sudan and Africa, in Cyprus, Egypt and Israel, a lot of places around the world. And then we have NATO now, which does great work throughout Europe. And a lot of nations are involved so that we don't ever get back to global wars like we had with both Korea. Really thank you for your time, and thank you for your support through the Poppy. It means a lot to those serving and to those that have come before us. And it means a lot to the families and the communities where we can raise funds to help out all of those people and organizations do better and be better.